Alright, ladies and gentlemen, and those not within, I'm coming to you playing some Breath of the Wild because I have a bit of a Tears of the Kingdom theory. So, for reference, just about everyone knows who's watching this, I will be playing Tears of the Kingdom the day it comes out on stream, or at least the day after it comes out. I have already pre-ordered it. And I'm going to say this outright right now. Spoilers for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I will be talking about some pretty heavy Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom spoilers, so if you do not want to hear those, I suggest you log off now, but if you do not care, then stay here. Okay. So, for some background, I am a very big Zelda fan. I have been since I was a kid. For reference, my favorite Zelda game is Wind Waker, just so I can go ahead and solidify myself as a Zelda nerd. I am a big Wind Waker fan, yeah. And I say this to say that I am also very knowledgeable as a deep Zelda fan. I am also a knower of Zelda lore, and this is where I know. Not where I know, but this is where my Zelda theory comes in for Tears of the Kingdom. So, people who know Zelda know that Tears of the Kingdom, or should I say Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom being a direct sequel, but Breath of the Wild falls at the end of every timeline, which is what is largely speculated. I'm a horrible shot. But it is largely speculated that Tears of the Kingdom falls at the end of the Zelda timeline. And because of that, we have a lot of things in Breath of the Wild that seem to be pretty consistent among all the Zelda games. So there's mention of a former Great Sea, which could be evidence of it taking place in, I believe, the adult timeline, because that's when the Wind Waker took place, in the Zelda adult timeline. There's also evidence that it potentially took place in the child timeline, with the Arbiter's Ground of the Gerudo being present in here as well, in Breath of the Wild. And there's also evidence that it potentially took place in the not adult timeline, but the Downfall timeline in Breath of the Wild as well. So, that leads me to the theory. Tears of the Kingdom, if you look at the logo for Tears of the Kingdom, it is an Ouroboros. An Ouroboros is a symbol of basically a snake or a serpent-like figure eating its own tail, and it typically represents kind of... I'm gonna piss someone off with saying this, definitely, so I'm gonna try to trend light. But almost like a continuation, a loop, in a sort of sense. Like a looping figure. And I found that very interesting, especially when it comes to looking at Breath of the Wild as a timeline piece. And Tears of the Kingdom, by extension, as a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. You see, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild both take place in a world with elements that hint at it coming at the end of all Zelda timelines. Moreover, Tears of the Kingdom has Sky Islands, which are very similar to the Sky Islands that we see in Skyward Sword, which is the first game in the Zelda timeline. Also, if you look at the trailer of Tears of the Kingdom, it honestly kinda looks like we might get Goddess Hylia in it, potentially. And as we know from Breath of the Wild, Ganondorf, or I should say Ganon, or Demise, has pretty much given up on reincarnation, which is why he has come to us in the form of Calamity Ganon in Breath of the Wild. And here's my theory. I believe that the reason why Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have elements of every Zelda game in them and in their world that hint at it being from all timelines is because Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild take place at the end of all timelines. And by at the end of all timelines, I don't mean it is a unified timeline. I mean, I believe that the Legend of Zelda series is a loop. I believe it is a time loop, and I believe that the end of Tears of the Kingdom will lead into the events that will start Skyward Sword. which is why, basically I think that we get Tears of the Kingdom, and the timeline is going to loop at the very end. More than likely, I feel like the curse may end, but the Mise will come out somehow, and, I don't know, try to end it. Because again, Ganondorf is done with reincarnating, by extension the Mise is done with reincarnating, which could hint at the idea that things may be stopping and the Mise may come out to try to finish the job himself, which would effectively end the curse on Ganondorf. And personally, I would like to see a good Ganondorf every once in a while. This is a personal thing, not necessarily a lore thing, but this is a personal thing. I would like to see a good Ganondorf. Moreover, hold up. I think that this timeline loop, again, would explain why there are elements of every Zelda game in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. If this is a timeline loop over Hyrule, that would be, I believe, a salient explanation as to why we have mentions of a former Great Sea, things like the Arbiter's Ground, etc., in Tears of the Kingdom. It would make perfect sense that a timeline loop would allow for each timeline to happen, and with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom being the end of the timeline. It would also make sense for the reincarnation loop. It is a constant cycle of reincarnation, and that constant cycle of reincarnation would work really well. It would work really well if it is a time loop, you know? And it would also allow for infinite games to happen. And again, going back to the elements of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that we see, with Tears of the Kingdom having Sky Islands and things that we really haven't heard of before, such as the Zonai, who had not been previously mentioned in the Zelda franchise, it could very easily explain why we don't see these elements present in other Zelda games. Like, you could say, yeah, they emerged after all of these other elements, or it could also be a thing of, like, they died out after Tears of the Kingdom. That was a result of a timeline loop. Also, it appears as if Zelda and Link, this is also a personal theory of mine. Well, I've actually seen it espoused by other people too. But it might also be a thing of Zelda being stuck in the past with living Zonai, which appears to be what's going on with her. If Zelda's stuck in the past with other Zonai, then it could hint at time travel stuff, and time travel stuff would fit in perfectly with a time loop. So basically, to sum it up, I believe that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom actually lead into a time loop, which will go into the first Zelda game in the timeline, which is Skyward Sword, which would explain the Sky Islands, and also the elements of Breath of the Wild that are pulled from everything, because it doesn't necessarily make sense for everything in Breath of the Wild to have happened repeatedly, and for us to have gone through every timeline, unless there is, holy fuck, that is a Guardian. Unless there is a time loop that we may be dealing with. Which is why I believe in what I like to call the time loop theory. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon so that you know whenever I go live. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next video. And before I do log off, make sure to tell me what you think I might be right or wrong with this theory. Holy shit, I'm very rusty at Breath of the Wild. Ah, Christ. Okay, come on. And plunk. No. Plunk. I'm bad. Okay, cool. Got him. Love you all. See you on the next video. Peace.